Hello and welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras.
And I'm Natasha Kircha. Coming up in today's newscast, thousands of Israelis keep close to bomb shelters as over 160 rockets are launched from the Gaza Strip.
Gantz and Netanyahu inch closer to unity government.
And the European Union's High Court of Justice issues a highly controversial ruling. It has been a very tough day here in Israel. Israel is under attack by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad from the Gaza Strip. And the IDF says that more than 160 rockets and counting have been fired at Israel, 60 of which were intercepted by the Iron Dome missile defense system.
Rocket sirens have been wailing from southern Israel all the way to Tel Aviv. And in fact, this morning, we woke up to some of those sirens. Initially, the IDF announced that schools and workplaces would be shuttered in Tel Aviv, advising Israelis to stay close to the bomb shelters, which is the first time that that's happened since the 2014 Gaza war. And Israelis living in southern Israeli towns are still being confined to their homes. The Israeli army says that it's preparing for several days of battle ahead.
I was 150 meters from here when I heard a huge explosion. I got the feeling immediately that we are talking about on my factory and my place, my warehouse. I ran in and see this catastrophe, everything going on fire. The only thing that I'm so happy is that nobody was here. My employee was at home, and that's our biggest luck ever.
אנחנו גרים כאן מזה 2.5, ולאור המצב הביטחוני שהתחיל הבוקר, החלטנו לקחת את הילדים, לנסוע לירושלים, לסבא וסבתא, שם הילדים יוכלו להיות רגועים ושלווים, ואנחנו נחזור לכאן לשגרה, לחיים הנורמטיביים שלנו כאן, למרות המצב.
Rockets have been falling since 6 a.m. and red alert sirens have been trilling repeatedly across the south, sending thousands to bomb shelters. A barrage has been fired from Gaza as far as Tel Aviv, Holon, Rishon LeZion, Gedera, and Ashdod, striking several homes, a mattress business, and other residential areas. And several rockets fell in and near Tel Aviv as well, with one creating a massive hole in a highway in the south of the city, and another nearly missing several cars on a highway in Gan Yavne.
רצנו מיד לחדר ממ"ד, אמרתי לבעלי שלי לנעול את החדר חזק כמה שאפשר, כי בדרך כלל לא תמיד אנחנו נועלים, אנחנו יותר סוגרים ולא נועלים, נעלנו חזק ונשמע בום מפחיד. הבום הזה פשוט היה מחריד, והרגשתי שפשוט נמצא בתוך הבית.
But so far, one Israeli has been lightly injured by shrapnel in a rocket strike near Gan Yavne, and dozens more are being treated for shock, anxiety, and injuries from falls while running to bomb shelters. One 8-year-old girl is also in serious condition after having collapsed suddenly while hiding in a bomb shelter during a rocket attack on Holon.
The violence comes following the Israeli army's assassination of Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror leader Bahaa AlAlata overnight. Now, the IDF targeted AlAlata as he slept, killing him and his wife. But Israel says he was intending to carry out imminent attacks against Israel. The Palestinian Islamic Jihad is threatening all-out war with Israel over AlAlata's assassination.
כל מי שחושב שאפשר לפגוע באזרחינו ולחמוק מידנו הארוכה, טועה. הוכחנו שאנחנו יכולים לפגוע בדיוק כירורגי בכל מקום שבו יסתתרו המחבלים. מי שיפגע בנו, אנחנו נפגע בו.
AlAlata has been under the Israeli radar for the last 10 years at least and is directly implicated in hundreds of other terror attacks against Israel as well.
האיש הזה היה פצצה מתקתקת חיה, וגם בימים האלו ממש, האחרונים, עבד ועמל ותכנן פיגועים והתכוון להוציא אותם לפועל. ניסינו למנוע את הפעולה שלו בדרכים מגוונות, אך ללא הצלחה. ובנסיבות שנוצרו, המלצנו לדרג המדיני לסכל אותו.
The IDF has launched a campaign of retaliatory airstrikes against the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror group and is targeting PIJ underground facilities and training camps, including naval bases, that they believe are being used for the storage and manufacturing of weapons. These sites are also believed to be critical to the terror group. IDF aircraft have also struck a group of Islamic Jihad operatives in the northern Gaza Strip, And the Gaza Health Ministry says that 4 Palestinians have been killed so far and dozens more are wounded.
Israelis are still urged to stay close to bomb shelters, and the military says that they're preparing themselves for several days of fighting with terror groups in the Gaza Strip. Now, joining us live via Skype from southern Israel, please welcome Adele Raymer, an English teacher and the founder of the Facebook group Life on the Border with Gaza. So our first question for you was, how was it waking up to the alarms this morning without any earlier notice?
So here's the thing. I didn't. I didn't have any of those alarms. The alarms were further up north. But the good thing is that this time it was exceptionally well organized as far as I'm concerned, because the attack in Gaza was around 4 a.m. and by 5 o'clock there were messages going out on the WhatsApps and the regional information groups letting people know that schools would be closed, that roads would be closed, that we should stay inside. Like, we got for the first time warning that this was going to happen. Wow. Now, for those who get rockets in Tel Aviv unexpectedly, they still have like a minute and something to get ready to run. Well, we have 0 to 10 seconds, so this was especially meaningful for me.
So what is the situation like on the Gaza border periphery area now?
So since it's mostly Islamic Jihad that are shooting, and they're mostly in the northern Gaza Strip, the rockets that are being shot off are mostly there. I've only had 1 rocket alert today here where I live on Nirim. We're about less than 2 kilometers from the border, but we're more towards the central Gaza Strip. But it's tense. You never know when it's going to happen. Like, I'm not even putting the microphone on my shirt now because in case there's an alarm, I don't want to have to take it off and run because I'm connected to the computer. So it's very tense, and we really have no idea where this is going. And the thing is, even though we've lived through so many of these already, each one is a different scenario, and you don't know the scenario ahead of time. Hopefully, my government has a scenario, have specific aims that they want to achieve, and it's not just taking advantage of an opportune moment when they could take this guy out and not have a plan for what's next.
All right, well, Adele, thank you so much for being with us. Stay safe and stay strong. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now the Palestinian Islamic Jihad is now declaring that they are going to war with Israel in response to the killing of Palestinian terror leader Bahaa AlAlata. But so who is Bahaa AlAlata, and why did Israel choose to target him now?
AlAlata was a powerful head of the northern Gaza branch of the Islamic Jihad's military wing. He was the chief of their Al-Quds brigades in the Strip, and he allegedly answered to Iran, if to anyone at all. But he's also directly linked to hundreds of attacks on Israel, according to the IDF, with another one imminent. In fact, the majority of all major terror attacks against Israelis in the past year have been attributed to AlAlata's planning and orders, including sniper attacks, drones armed with explosives, and the latest volleys of rockets that hit Sderot during a festival in August and a home in early November. Then, just as further proof, the Islamic Jihad terror organization said that AlAlata was undergoing a heroic act when he was assassinated, but they didn't elaborate. That's not all. Judging by the rhetoric surrounding him, the attack on AlAlata seems like it's been in the works for over a decade. In 2008, he personally led several attacks on Israel, including an infiltration in which he and 3 others crossed into Israel, murdering 2 at a fuel depot. Then finally, in 2012, there was an alleged attempt on his life during Operation Pillar of Defense. But it wasn't too long after that targeted killings as a policy in general was dropped altogether, and Israeli officials maintain that they have not returned to that policy.
Joining us now with more on the security situation in the south, we have Likud Party Knesset member Yoav Kish and former commander of the IDF's 8200 Intelligence Unit, Brigadier General Hanan Giffen. All right, now let's speak a little bit about the impact of the assassination of Abu AlAlata on Gaza and Israel. What is this going to look like long term?
Well, I think he's a known terrorist. I'm not calling it assassination. I think it's a move that Israel had to do against an active bomb that is threatening the lives of our army, soldiers, and civilians. Abu AlAlata is in charge of, I'd say, in the last year, all the fire exchange between Gaza and Israel many times started because of him. He is funded by Iran directly. His motivation is to increase the tension between Israel and Gaza, and on his agenda was to get to, as far as he can, to get Israel and Hamas into a fight. And the thing is that what happened is when there was something against Israel, we were hitting Hamas as in charge of what's going on in Gaza. And basically he was out there with no references to what he was doing. So I think that it was essential that Israel made the decision that this terrorist should not continue with his efforts to hurt Israel. We see that his organization, the extreme Islamic Jihad, is targeting now civilians in Tel Aviv, in other cities, in Ashdod, in Ashkelon, with just firing rockets to hit civilians. And I think it was a very important move that Israel did. And the question now is what's going to happen in the next 24, 48 hours.
Right.
Yeah, I just like to add that this targeted strikes, which is targeted strike, it's not a killing, which Israel actually suspended for 2 or 3 or even more years as part of the negotiation between Israeli Hamas and the Egyptian. So Israel gave up this kind of weapon. In fact, it has a mesmerizing effect, this targeted killing. Just imagine the impact it has on other commanders of Jihad Islami and the Hamas. You know, just targeting a small room, nobody knows that probably 2, 3, 4 people should have known this location. And that's a direct bomb, and you're an Air Force guy, right? Direct bomb through the windows into a small room. So you can imagine what tales are now being told in Gaza and what effect it's created. Prime Minister has said that Israel is not going to renew because it's such a little weapon, but it's a weapon that they should know that it exists, these guys. So it is not used against the Hamas because Hamas is under this discussion that with Israel and
well, I mean, I guess my question here is, you know, is Israel also signaling Iran with these attacks? Is there kind of a greater plan here that we perhaps aren't aware of? Because we're also hearing reports that Islamic Jihad commander was targeted in Syria as well. Of course, it's not been confirmed whether or not Israel was responsible for that. But it does seem that, you know, there may be a bigger message here.
Yeah, like a wider attack.
I think that what happened was that Iran has its own proxy strategy. And the Islamic Jihad is one of their proxies. And they are using them to inflate fire in our region. And I think that, especially after last Friday, which was also, again, rockets were shot against Israel in the nearest border of around Gaza, Israel simply said today we had enough. We've been working on the decision to a targeted killing against this terrorist was taken about a month or so ago when we saw that he is basically one of the main reasons for unstable situation in the area. There are discussions with the Egyptians regarding creating some reduced and cool in the actual with Hamas.
Yeah.
And this guy is the main reason that things has not been moving forward still.
Yeah, that's what to add. That
final comment, yeah.
If you look at the reaction in the Arab world, it's a very cold reaction. Nobody actually react to it.
What about Hamas?
Hamas is taking a very interesting posture so far. Is standing behind. Rhetorics are very high, but actions are none. So we have to see what will proceed.
This is a main issue regarding Hamas. Israel said, and we heard it from the Prime Minister and the Chief of the Army, basically we're not aiming to move into a severe attack against Gaza. And if Hamas will stay away from the fire, we're not trying to, to accelerate. But if Hamas is going to do and get into the fire circle, then of course Israel will have to be more aggressive.
Well, unfortunately, we have to wrap up this first part of the interview, but you guys will be back later on in the show. The one thing that I would just like to mention that you said prior to us beginning was that this has been in the works for about a month, right? So,
the planning has been even longer,
right?
And the decision that this has a green light, that's about the time frame we're talking about.
We'll come back to this in just a few minutes' time. Thank you guys for being with us.
Thank you.
But in the meantime, in light of the security situation, where do Israeli government coalition negotiations stand? Well, The Blue and White Party has canceled and rescheduled its ongoing coalition negotiations for tomorrow.
Still, leader Benny Gantz says the escalation in Gaza will not affect his ongoing negotiations to form a coalition. And in even bigger news, Gantz and Prime Minister Netanyahu are reportedly inching closer to closing a unity deal. And according to party statements, a proposal brought forward by the Likud would involve a rotating prime minister position. Netanyahu would continue on for the first year, stepping down in favor of Gantz for the remaining 3 years, and Netanyahu would agree to step down earlier in the event of a criminal trial against him.
Then, to facilitate the success of this plan, multiple party leaders from the right and religious bloc have vowed to ensure that Netanyahu abides by the terms. But for now, two issues still remain. First, there's no law in place that would force Netanyahu to step down in light of a trial. And second, no decision has yet been made with respect to the legal immunity Netanyahu has been pushing for either.
Questions have arisen as to whether the assassination of Palestinian Islamic Jihad leader Bahaa AlAlata was planned as part of a political ploy by the right to gain support. But Blue and White chairman Benny Gantz says that he was well aware of the plans for the targeted assassination at least 10 days beforehand, saying the terrorist Bahaa AlAlata was destined for death, just like any terrorist who commits murderous acts against Israeli citizens. And while the government deals with the chaos, ILTV's Shanna Fold is out in the streets asking Israelis how they're dealing.
Well, the people here on the streets of Tel Aviv say it's not quite as hectic as usual, but people are still going out. They're going to supermarkets, they're going to the store, they're going for a walk with their friends, and business as usual, the day goes on.
I'm used to it, just as usual, as any other day.
I live in Tel Aviv. Originally, I'm from Gaza Strip. The situation in Gaza very complicated. They have a difficult life to the old people there, big poverty. Someone need to do something there.
I was home till 12 o'clock and then I felt that I can't sit down anymore, so I just went out for a round just to take a small walk.
This morning we felt a little nervous and we were surprised, but now I think the routine became to the city and we feel regularly.
Rockets to Tel Aviv for everywhere, and we trust my army, cross my finger to my army, and we trust the God, and everything is under control. Don't worry, don't scare.
I just hope that the word or the phrase peace will come back to our conversations.
Just keep smiling.
And now, returning for more on the ongoing Gaza crisis, we have Likud Party Knesset member Yoav Kish and former commander of the IDF's 8200 Intelligence Unit, Brigadier General Hanan Giffen. So the first question here that many people have been asking us is whether or not this targeted terrorist killing of Bahaa AlAlata was actually a political ploy.
Well, I heard these rumors. People are saying that because we are in a delicate political situation. But I can tell you that as one that had the knowledge, by the way, not only me, together also with Gabi Ashkenazi in the Foreign and Defense Committee, these issues has been talked and discussed in the last month or so before. And there was a green light for this operation, I think, about 2 weeks ago when the cabinet meeting has decided to move forward, and that Benny Gantz himself was updated on that. So it's true that we're, but if you just think about it, Israel in the last year, we're in election, or it can be a month before election. So, and we didn't act, we didn't do nothing because, and people say, why aren't you moving? Why aren't you hating them? So eventually, when the decision was taken, nobody really planned that it would be today. But the decision was taken by the cabinet, and I think it was all approved. And I think that everybody now understands that there was no political agenda behind this decision.
So I actually want to move to you now, Brigadier General. Why do you believe it is that people like Lieberman are taking the time out? Right now we have great unity, even across parties, saying this was not a political move. Why do you think that many are saying, oh, it is, just because?
No, in Israel, when you hear all the political debates, you might be misled. But actually, once it's in our DNA, the Israeli DNA, once you're facing a crucial security issue, that's vanished. So here we are in a situation where I would say 80% of the Israeli would like to go further in this.
And do you think that Naftali Bennett, stepping into the role as defense minister today, actually will continue in this policy of dropping politics aside and keeping security?
Well, I'm not a political guy, so I cannot. But I believe that the the issue of Jihad Islami is not going to disappear. We will face it again and again. For the last 30 years, we are facing it in various forms, very zealot, very extremist organization. And Israel will have to find a way to contain the jihad problem, not the Hamas, to make sure that the jihad stayed aside. Everybody take
So that's where, I mean, my next question comes in. What should Israel be doing to de-escalate this situation? And how long is this round of violence going to last? What can we expect?
Well, we're actually, nobody knows this for now. We're on the path of either we could go back into the quiet times tomorrow, or we can find ourselves in a few days on the edge of Gaza, entering forces into Gaza in order to stop the rockets from there. So it's kind of not clear yet, and it all depends, by the way, what will be if, let's say, if some horrible thing will happen and they will be able to attack and hit and cause damage in Israel. Israel will have to respond. Right. So it's still not clear where we're heading. I can tell you one thing, that Israel is not looking forward to increase this situation, and it depends. If they will be quiet from Gaza, we will maintain the quiet.
All right, well, unfortunately, we have to move on. We've hit time, but thank you so much for joining us on this precarious day.
Just one thing to say, I think now it's clear that Israel needs a unity government, and that's the only solution.
Yeah, well, that might be the positive outcome of this violence, right?
Thank you very much.
Thank you both so much for joining.
All right, for over a year now, Israeli companies operating in the disputed territories have been in limbo, waiting for the European Union's High Court to rule on the labeling laws for their goods.
Well, on Tuesday, the court finally released its decision. It's official. Israeli companies working in East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and in the Golan must now label their exports to Europe as coming from occupied territories. The EU does not accept these territories as Israeli territory, and therefore, according to the EU's High Court of Justice, consumers should be able to make informed decisions related to their ethical considerations. The issue is being widely condemned by Israel, Israeli companies like the Psagot winery, which first appealed these labeling guidelines, and by pro-Israel legal groups. They argue the labeling law is discriminatory and facilitates anti-Semitic boycotts such as the international BDS movement. And in response to the decision, the Yesha Council likewise is urging the Israeli government to act and overturn the hypocritical decision that isn't worth the paper it's written on. All right, well, turning back to the terror that is emanating from the Gaza Strip, our final update for now is the following. The IDF has actually just hit an Islamic Jihad naval training compound, an attack tunnel in the northern Gaza Strip, and a tunnel that was being dug in central Gaza.
Absolutely, and the newly appointed Defense Minister, Naftali Bennett, has also now declared a special situation, a quote-unquote special situation, around the 80 kilometers surrounding the Gaza Strip, the Gaza periphery area.
Nobody knows what this special situation means.
We're not sure what exactly that means yet, but we'll find out, and the special situation remains in effect for 48 hours.
All right, well, on that note, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be partly cloudy and warm, with lows starting at 58 or 14 degrees Celsius in Jerusalem, and minimum temperatures will rise a bit, though, to around 70 or 21 degrees Celsius in Eilat, Tel Aviv, and in Haifa. And then tomorrow, you can expect more sunny to partly cloudy skies and highs between 87 and 91 or 31 to 33 degrees Celsius.
That's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.51 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook and follow us on Instagram. I'm Aaron Porras.
And I'm Natasha Kirchek. Thanks so much for watching.
מה זה, נפל על המכולה שלו, אני לא מאמין. יואו.